Okay, and I am Shani Katzman, Omaha via New York. Okay, so today we're going to talk about beyond Matzah Balls. Okay, and I'm open to questions, and there's a zillion questions that we could ask about why we do things and how we do things, but I want to just give a little introduction and just speak about a few things, and then we can maybe go in different directions. The Haggadah is the most published book. In other words, there are many. There are picture books and children's Haggadahs and adult Haggadahs and different people's interpretations of the Haggadahs. Haggadahs are the most widely published book, I think, in the universe. Okay, there have been many now the actual text is the same in all the Haggadahs, but the commentary, the focus is different. Like, for example, there are Holocaust Haggadahs that focus on with the art of that era, or there are Renaissance Haggadahs that various Haggadahs that focus on a specific theme or style or whatever. The Seder is the most widely attended ritual there is, and it's the oldest ritual that is in existence for all these years. So Pesach and the Seder have a very important place in Jewish life and in Jewish values. Now, what is this? What is unique about Pesach? What is special about Pesach that it makes it so central and so foundational?
Freedom.
Okay, freedom.
It's
good.
At home.
What?
We do it at home.
We do it at home. Okay.
That's when we became the Jewish people.
That's when we became the Jewish people. Good.
It's a journey.
It's a journey. Good. Anybody else?
It's fun.
Okay, it's fun. It is multifaceted. We use our taste, our smell, our words, our stories, our language. We engage all our senses, exactly. And what else? So it's fun. It's engaging.
I think it's something that from a family standpoint, there's that responsibility of always carrying on that tradition of remembering the freedom, of remembering the journey, and I think that from a family standpoint, it has a very strong responsibility as a family unit to carry that on.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, if I had to pick one, like why Pesach is so foundational, it would be a combination of everything that you have all said, plus more. Okay? So what is Pesach? Pesach, like Debbie said, is our birth, the birth of the Jewish people. Pesach is the time of our freedom, of our liberation. Pesach is a family time and a time where we take our values and pass them on to the next generation. Where does the word Haggadah come from? Haggadah comes from the Hebrew word V'higadeta levincha, and you shall tell it to your children or to your son. On that day, the child will say, "What's going on? What is this?" And you should teach him. Okay, and that's why we divide the Seder into speaking to 4 different kinds of children. The wise child, the rebellious child, the simple child, the child. Again, thinking about all the kinds of scenarios, all the kinds of possibilities within a family, and how do we pass on this tradition within our family. So number one, we are which family are we? We are, God took us unto him as his family. And God calls us B'ni Bechori Yisrael, my son, my firstborn Israel. And that is also why God goes ahead and smites the firstborn of Egypt because Egypt antagonized my firstborn. So I want to set the record straight about the firstborn. My firstborn is my firstborn, and don't mess with my firstborn. So that was God's message, among many other things, with the smiting of the firstborn. So basically, the Seder is an establishing of our freedom, a time for family to pass on from one generation to the other. The fact that it's fun is because we need to engage every type of person, and we need it also we need to experience it on so many levels. You know, I'm sure you've all heard of gardeners, the multiple intelligences, where everybody has a different modality through which they learn best. You know, some of us, right, in kindergartens you sing the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, the ABCs. Singing is one of the modalities. Visuals is one of the modalities. Storytelling, listening, asking, tasting, touching. Everybody has a different style of learning. So we want to make sure that we touch all the ways that a person might learn and make sure we get to everyone. Okay? Now, did you know that there is hardly a day that goes by that we don't mention the going out of Egypt? Okay? Even though Pesach is an annual event where we went out of Egypt, Moses led us, we didn't have time to bake the matzah, our bread, we grabbed the dough and we left Egypt. But every single day we speak about Egypt. The first of the 10 commandments is, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Okay, that is God. He doesn't say, I'm the one who created you, I'm the one who created the world, I'm the one who helps you pay your mortgage. No, I'm the one who took you out of Egypt. When you have when you say the Shema, every single day you remember the going out of Egypt. In the Kiddush on Shabbos, we remember the going out of Egypt. The words are Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim, a remembrance or a memorial for the going out of Egypt. So every single week, every single day. So what are we doing at the Seder? At the Seder, we are, it's like the generator of the freedom. It's the generator of the rebirth. It's the generator of the, let's get this show on the road so that we're free, that we belong to God, and that our family is going to be on this track. Okay? So while it is an event that happens once a year, and once a year we empower ourselves and we garner the strength and the empowerment to get us free every single day, every single week, but every single day we think about the going out of Egypt. And so therefore, when we take a look at the Seder, we have to see it as a template for freedom, for Judaism as a whole, and for the transmission of these values from way back when to our time. Now, there's so many things I want to talk about, but I'm just going to show you a few. First of all, I just want to mention this. This is a holiday guide about Pesach that you should be getting in the mail. If you'd like, you're welcome to take an additional one and share it with someone who might not be receiving it or who might want to learn. And then if you want to look through it and if you have any questions. Also, there is the sale of chametz, which you want, we customary. We check our houses for chametz, and we also sell our chametz. We sell our chametz means that we are not permitted as Jews. There are 3 things about chametz. We're not allowed to eat chametz. We're not allowed to own chametz. And we're not allowed to see it. okay? So seeing it means, in your own environment, you have control of, I mean, you can't, if you're walking down the street, you're not, in the park, you can't, if someone has their sandwich, they have their sandwich. But as far as in your house, it shouldn't be seen. In your house, you shouldn't own it. And in your house, you shouldn't see it, eat it, okay? So what you do before Pesach is you put all your chametz into one area or several areas, and you sign a document which is legal, and it's not a joke. It's a legal binding that says the chametz in my house is in this place. I am selling it, and then at the end of Pesach, a rabbi will take these forms and in a legal contract sells it and then buys it back after Pesach. So you keep it, label it. What? What do you don't want it? Sell it at the next garage sale.
Has it in your house, then you might want to.
The pantry.
Yeah, you can get rid of it. Get rid of it before Pesach. But you should literally mark it, with a piece of tape or say chametz, sold or whatever, so that you know. And again, I'm just bringing that to your attention here. Okay, now, what's the difference between chametz and matzah? This is just the word. But what is the difference between
One we
chametz and
don't eat and
matzah?
one we do.
What?
One we don't eat and
One we don't and one we do.
I'm
Okay, what's the difference? What's the difference though? The leavening, okay? So matzah is flour and water. Chametz is flour and water. But chametz is flour and water that is left to leaven, to rise, okay? Now what is that symbolic of? What happens when chametz rises? What is that?
Ego.
Okay, it's full of air, right? It's almost like a balloon. You blow into a balloon and you stick a little pin in it and it pops, right? The balloon is small, but when you fill it with air, it's big, okay? The same is true with our breads and our muffins, okay? Or our cakes or our torts. When flour and water mix together, if you just put it straight in the oven, you'll get a flat. But if you give it time to rise, it will grow, and that's really the only difference. Now, if you take a look at the word itself, both chametz and matzah have a mem, right? They both have a mem. They both have a tzadi, right?
Yeah.
But what's different? You have the chet or the hay, okay? Now the chet is closed on all sides. Ego, I'm stuck in my ways. The hay has a little escape hatch, okay? Which means that as stuck as you are, you're open to another possibility. And the air or the steam or whatever it is can leave. And interestingly, in the book of Genesis, it speaks about a human being. This is actually at the sin of Cain and Abel, when Cain killed Abel. Where is your brother? And Cain says, well, am I my brother's keeper? That whole conversation. And the idea in the Torah in that story says that sin always crouches by an opening. Okay? Sin or iniquity or troublemaking or any word you want to use that means not acting the way you should, crouches in an opening. Now both the chet and the hay have that opening on the bottom, which tells us that both a humble person and an arrogant person each have the vulnerability to doing the wrong thing. But the hay has the escape route. And what is that escape route? What is that escape route? That escape route is humility. That escape route is honesty, integrity, knowing that is whatever you do, you can always turn around and make amends. Okay, so that is the difference between chametz and matzah. And by the way, this is what we're establishing with the obsession about no matzah, only chametz. We spend weeks getting rid of the chametz from our homes. We think about the difference between chametz and matzah. Well, by the time we get to the Seder, we've already been thinking about this for a long time. We've been getting into gear. What's chametz and what's matzah, and what's the difference? So we are already establishing for ourselves and for our children and for our families. Chametz means I'm arrogant. I don't have room for God. I don't have room for my humility. I don't have room for another opinion. I don't have room. Matzah says, I'm open. I'm humble. I'm open, and I know that even when I mess up, I can always turn around and start again.
So why in Shabbat we eat?
Why do we eat challah? Okay, so that's a very good question. So, did everybody hear her question? She said, "Why do we? If chametz is so bad, we should only eat matzah all the time." Go ahead.
Well, first of all, chametz is only bad for 8 days a year, right?
But the question is why? If it's such a bad thing,
It's a bad thing on Pesach, that's when we're commanded not to use. That's
right,
8 days,
right.
correct,
But based on this discussion, it
So
seems
why
like
not
it's
eat
bad.
Just because it's bad doesn't mean we shouldn't learn how to regulate, how to decide how to behave, how to manage these. I'm not articulating this very.
You are.
Okay.
You are.
So
And yes,
to learn restraint and to follow through
exactly.
on overcoming the challenges and the temptations.
Exactly. And by the way, excellent, Mrs. Wolf. By the way, this is the story. On Pesach, we ran out of Egypt. We needed to clean up our act. We needed the flat matzah. We needed the humility. Out the door. We're out of Egypt. Now, we have to start working with ourselves. And we start to count the 49 days until Mount Sinai, the counting of the Omer, when we get to Shavuot. Guess what we offer in the temple or in the tabernacle on Shavuot? Two breads, 2 challahs. Why? Like Nancy said, we have worked through tackling the temptation, tackling the arrogance, the confidence, the self-esteem. There's a benefit to having a healthy self-esteem. There's a benefit to having confidence, right? In our times, we are suffering from an you probably know this in the counseling field, that there are so many people with such a terrible self-image, with such terrible self-esteem, with lack of confidence. Because there's a problem with even though we're so egotistical and we can do everything and we know, and there's something missing with our healthy self-esteem. So first we have to start the bottom up. No arrogance whatsoever. Then we learn how to use it, how to temper it, until we get to Shavuot when we receive the Torah, and then we're able to receive the Torah and to work with chametz year round. So year round we've learned how to control it, how to use it. But then when we come to Pesach again, we start all the way again. We have to reboot or recalibrate. We start again from scratch, back to only matzah, and then we can tackle the chametz. Okay. Now, this brings us to another point. One of the comments where, in the discussion about matzah and chametz, where Moses is commanding the people and telling them how things are going to be, he tells them, "Ushmartem et hamatzot." You should guard the matzot, okay? And he spells it like this. Matzot, like this, okay? Okay, matzot. Now, matzot can also be, if you change the vowels, what would this be, Jill?
Mitzvot.
Meets,
Mitzvot.
mitzvot.
Mitzvot, I'm sorry, mitzvot.
Mitzvot. Ushmartem et hamatzot. You should guard the matzot, but that is also telling you that matzah, everything we do with matzah is a metaphor for how we should handle the mitzvot. Now, what happens on Pesach with the matzot? We guard them, we take care of them, we rush to bake it within 18 minutes. There's intention, there's guarding, there's watching. And so in the same breath, we're being told, watch those mitzvot, guys, watch those mitzvot, which means, again, this is a establishment or like a takeoff. This is like the runway for the Jewish experience for the year round, and therefore we're told about how to treat the matzah and the mitzvah. We're told about what our personal state needs to be as far as, humility, be heavy on the humility, low on the esteem and arrogance, and then we'll walk you through it by the time we get to Pesach, by the time we get to Shavuot. Okay, so these are two things, just not even in the Haggadah to think about. There's another very interesting thing I want to share with you, which maybe tells you, as I was putting out the Hamantash, and I'm like, it's a class about Pesach, and we're eating Hamantash. Okay? Did you know that on the second day of Pesach, it is customary to prepare a dish, anything, okay? You can make your favorite farfel, you can make your favorite chicken, whatever you want to make, and say, this dish is in honor of Esther, Queen Esther from the Pesach story. Why? Why? Because on the second day of Pesach, tradition tells us, history attests to the fact that Haman was hung on the second day of Pesach. Okay? Now, how is it? It was a few weeks later, right? First, he was charged as guilty. Then there was a lot of paperwork that had to be done. Then, there was a lot of stuff that had to be worked through. And on the second day of Pesach, Haman was hanged. So the mystics asked the question, what's greater? What's Pesach or Purim?
Well, you couldn't have Purim if you don't have Pesach.
You couldn't have Purim if you don't have Pesach. Let's forget about what's better. Do you like Hamantash or matzah? Forget about that. Or matzah balls. But which miracle was greater?
Pesach.
Pesach.
Yeah.
Okay, why?
Split the Red Sea.
Split the sea, took us out of
10 plagues.
Egypt,
Hashem was there and I am not an angel yet.
Exactly, he was there, jumped over right? And, bottom line, we left Egypt and we were free. What happened at the end of the story of Purim? You see, Esther was in the palace. We still lived in Persia, right? It took us a month to hang Haman. Still, red tape, government stuff that had to be dealt with. We were still living in Persia. It wasn't a complete, wholesome, you guys are free, get out of Persia and go back to the Holy Land. No, we were still stuck in Persia. So then the question becomes, we have such a beautiful, wonderful Pesach. Nothing is greater and better than this miracle. Why would we, it's like saying, Let me think of an example. Where, you know, like, you're celebrating the big thing. Oh yeah, and by the way, here's, you know, this. What is this? Oh, I'll give you an example. You know, your child graduates, valedictorian of the class, and standing with a diploma, and you're like, oh, and here's your third grade project. You know, you won the spelling bee. I mean, what? How does that even compare, right? Like what? Here we're talking about such a monumental, and here we're talking about a little. So the mystics analyze it and say like this: what happened on Pesach? Where did the impetus for Pesach come from? God.
Sleep.
God. God said, I am going to take these people. I am going to bring them to me. I am going to pull all kinds of tricks out of my bag, and we are going to take them out of slavery once and for all. And he did. God can do anything.
Why do you wait so long?
Okay, that's a good question. We'll talk about that soon. Hold the question.
Good question.
But he just took us out, and we were, and it was thorough, complete, mesmerizing. Wow. Okay, fantastic. Purim was, we did it. We were in trouble. We cried and begged. We went to Esther. We begged. It's from, in mystical terminology, it's called isarusa dilatata, which means the arousal comes from below, the initiation comes from below, or isarusa dilaela, the initiation comes from above. So when the initiation comes from above, he scoops us up, and done deal. Complete, beautiful, fantastic. But when we invest, it's not as wholesome, bless you. It's not as complete. It's not perfect. But we did it. We did it. So which is better?
When an individual summons the courage to accomplish something and to fulfill the mitzvah.
Right. So what we're
that.
what we're saying here on Pesach, what we're saying here on Pesach is that both are important. Both are necessary. Even though on Pesach we're celebrating, wahoo, look what God did for us. There's something to be said for the individual who initiates, who reaches out to God, who on his or her own volition moves forward and wants to do the right thing, and wants to make a difference, and wants to come close to God. And that is the story of Purim. Now, what are the drawbacks of each of them? The drawback of God doing everything for us. What do we tell our kids?
Good, and then you don't do anything.
Right. If we do for our kids, if we do everything for them, they'll never learn how to do it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But if they do it themselves, are they going to do it as beautifully as we do it? No.
Not right off.
Not right off. Exactly. So God says, well, we will never do it as good as God, but God says, I appreciate when you do it, you do it. It may not be as perfect. It may not be as good. It may not be as all-encompassing, but you did it. And when you do something, you experience it. When someone else does something for you, you miss some things on the way. Right? So even though God picked us up, scooped us out, took us out of Egypt, good. But then we had to get rid of the Egypt from within. It was complete in terms of it was complete. But it didn't necessarily permeate our psyches. It didn't necessarily change us completely. And that's why we put together the Pesach and the Purim, because Pesach is big on God's initiation, and Purim is big on our initiation. And so we bring both of them together on the second day of Pesach, and we say we're remembering Esther, because there's something to be said for our investment.
Interesting.
Okay, now, we are, I only said 2 things and class is over. Okay, almost, it's almost over, okay.
Sorry.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you and happy Pesach.
Happy Pesach
Same
to
to
you
you.
too.
Same to you.
And may all the teachings be able to stick, yeah?
Yes, yes. Thank you.
All righty. Wonderful to see you. Wonderful to see you. Thanks for coming. Okay, so, okay, I want to talk about 2 more things, and then if we have time, we'll talk about some other things. Okay, don't cry. We can talk about that discussion. Would you ladies like to squeeze in here?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so one of the things that, when you think of the slavery in Egypt, what is one of the most talked about issues that we had in Egypt? One of? The work. The work, okay. What was like the decree that put us over the edge?
Jewish babies being tossed.
The babies being tossed in the Nile. Okay? Now, that, by the way, is emblematic of a Jew's problem in diaspora. The babies being thrown into the Nile. What is the Nile?
It was their god.
It was their god. What else was it?
It was their source of life,
It was their source of life. Why?
because all the agriculture happened on the banks of the Nile.
Okay. So it was their Wall Street.
Yeah.
Okay. It was their Wall Street. It was their, I don't know, whatever. It was their Silicon Valley. It was their stock market. Okay. It was their Berkshire Hathaway. This Nile was the life force of Egypt. And Pharaoh said, I want every Jewish kid thrown in the Nile. What does that mean?
They wanted to swallow our culture, swallow everything about us.
They wanted so the Nile is our business world, our culture, or
They
their
want us to
business
become
world, their
their-
culture. And they said, every Jewish kid, throw him in the Nile. Basically, Pharaoh was taking apart and saying, what is the most important aspect of Jewish life? I want to ruin it. The most important Jewish aspect of Jewish life is education, is taking those youngsters and inducting them into the meaning and the vision of what and teaching of what God has for all the kids. What does God want from a Jewish child to grow up and become a Jewish leader and become a Jewish activist and to become someone who is an ambassador for godliness in the world? What did Pharaoh say? Let's catch them first. Let's throw the kids in the culture and into the business world, and let's nip it in the bud. Now, were they successful? No, they weren't. How do we know that? Okay, good. The women, the midwives, exactly, did not listen to Pharaoh, and they came and helped the women deliver the babies and helped them hide the babies, and the babies were not thrown in the Nile. But when Pharaoh finally realized what the Jewish midwives were doing, Pharaoh got wind of the problem and said, you know what, we'll handle it ourselves. Thank you to the midwives. I will send my soldiers out, and they will check on the pregnant women and take the babies as soon as the babies are born. Now, what they did was they actually literally threw the babies in the Nile, collected the babies from the houses and threw them in the Nile. The Midrash tells us that there was a miracle, that angels came, collected the babies, took them out of the Nile, took them out into the fields, and fed them just like we had water that came out of the rock when we traveled in the desert. We're told that the angels served them honey and milk from the rocks and raised them until it was safe for them to come back into the... By the way, there's a beautiful Haggadah I will show you that has a painting of this idea. Yes. Now, then what happened to these folks when they grew up and they were crossing the sea? We're told in the Song of the Sea, it says, Zeh Kelev Anveu. They said, oh, this is God. In other words, this miracle that's happening now, we can tell this is God. How did they know that it was? How did they know what it looked like? Exactly, because these kids experienced that miracle before. But interestingly, I remember the Rebbe asked this question and said, because the Medrash goes on to say that the children recognize God first at the splitting of the sea. Now, the question is, how old were these kids? You know? They were young when they were by the rocks, but how old were they when they left Egypt? They were adults.
Yeah.
How old? You know how old?
40 and
How old was Moses? Very good thinking. How old was Moses?
Oh, he was in
40?
He was 80.
80. Yeah, he was
Moses was 80. Now, all these kids were Moses' age.
Yeah.
All these kids were Moses'
kids.
They weren't kids. Okay? So the Rebbe asked a simple question. We know it took, well, how do we calculate this? Because once Moses was in the Nile, remember he was put into the Nile, his mother put him in a little box,
basket,
right, in a basket, and then the astrologers told Pharaoh, oh, you don't have to worry anymore. The kid that you're worrying about is in the Nile. He's already in the Nile, you don't have to worry about it. So then Pharaoh stopped the decree. No more, you don't have to throw the babies in the Nile anymore. Okay, so Moses was the last one. They were about 80 years old when they left Egypt. So how could you say the kids recognized God first? And so the Rebbe explains that it was the child in them that recognized God. You know how you could become old and you could become kvetchy and not enthusiastic, and you lose your curiosity and your joy and your inspiration and your wonder and your curiosity. The Rebbe says these 80-year-old boys were so enthusiastic, and that's how the Medrash calls them, these kids. The kids that were in the Nile, these kids, they recognized God first. What do you mean they recognized God? These kids, they were old men. Yeah, but the way they recognize, the way they're acting, their enthusiasm, their curiosity, their joy, their love, they're acting like those kids. And this again is another lesson for us. In Judaism, you never grow old. And if you grow old, you gotta fix it. Because that joy, what's that song, Forever Young?
Yeah.
Right? This is what God expects of us. Forever young. That enthusiasm, that joy, that abandon. That's what these boys exhibited, even in their 80s. And again, this is another fundamental lesson for us as Jews going forward. Where's that enthusiasm? Oh, don't be, we're going to... Let's infuse it with joy and excitement and enthusiasm, because that's what it means to be a kid, and God wants us to be forever young. Okay, so any questions or comments? By the way, what I also wanted to talk about was the 4 cups of wine, and that they are why 4 cups? Because there were 4 expressions of redemption, and they are also sequential. The first one is God said, I'm going to take you out of Egypt. Physically, we're going to take you out of the slavery. The second one is emotionally, intellectually. You have to free yourself from biases or intellectual shortcomings. You've got to be free in your mind and in your heart. Okay? And the third one would be, God says, I want you to enter into a covenant with me. Right? And the fourth one is really speaking about the future redemption. Now, also we're told that the 4 cups of redemption, the 4 cups of wine, are also, each one of them is for one of the 4 matriarchs. And that the wine is symbolic of sovereignty, and that it's the feminine quality of sovereignty was obvious and prominent and dominant in all of the 4 matriarchs. So this redemptive quality is very much connected to women. And by the way, the Talmud says, in the merit of the righteous Jewish women, we left Egypt, and in the merit of the righteous Jewish women, we will ultimately be redeemed from our final exile. Okay, anybody else with questions? Okay, so what I wanted to say is these have all kinds of little tidbits of things you can think about. The 15 steps of the Seder are like a template for going from slavery to freedom. We need to free ourselves every single day. Mitzrayim, again, this is Mitzrayim, which means Egypt, also has the same meaning in Hebrew as limitations, borders, constraints. You're stuck. You gotta get out of Egypt. You gotta get out of those constraints. You gotta get out of those limitations. A Jew can always rise beyond the limitations. I also want to mention something, which is, I'm going to grab, there's a Haggadah here. I'm just going to read it to you in English because I think it's very, very important. I think nowadays, we think about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is rampant in Europe and what's happening in the U.S. and we all think about it. We're concerned about it. But the interesting thing is, the Haggadah tells us that anti-Semitism is not a new phenomenon. I'm just going to read this to you because I think this is very, very, very important. So I'm not saying that we don't need to be vigilant. We do need to be vigilant, and we need to pay attention, and we need to do what we need to do to protect ourselves and to eradicate it in whatever way we possibly can. But we should know that it's not a new story. It has happened, and this is what we say in the Haggadah. By the way, we lift our cups. When we say this, our full cups of wine, and we're speaking about the history of that. First, we started out with Laban, and he gave us aggravation, and then, Esau, and then we came down to Egypt, troubles. And God says, don't worry, you'll be in Egypt, and then I'll take you out. And the nation that imprisons you, I will judge them. Meaning, I'll take care of them. I'll judge them, and I will exact retribution. And then this is what we say next. We lift our cups, and we say like this. This is what has stood by our fathers and us. For not just one alone has risen against us to destroy us, but in every generation they rise against us to destroy us. Every generation. And the Holy One, blessed be He, saves us from their hand. And this is the story. When we read this, it should empower us. We have nothing to be afraid of. They hate us, they want to destroy us, but they will not destroy us because we have God with us on our side. We have to do what we have to do. We live in a world of nature and whatever, but never for a moment to think that oh, what are we going to do? We'll do what we have to do, and we'll be here tomorrow. So, yeah, I want to invite each of you and every one of you with your families to this coming Monday night, 6:30. We are having a dinner. It's the Rebbe's birthday, and so it's celebrated throughout the world. And we'd like to have a little celebration here. We'll talk about the Rebbe, his impact on our lives, and his impact on the world. And we'll serve a good dinner. And you could let Julie know if you can come. Do you have a question? Do you have a question?
She had a question.
Okay, let's hear your question.
Why did God wait so long?
Okay, the question I have is, did he wait so long? Did he wait long?
A lot of people suffer.
400 years.
Slavery. Beyond.
That's true. That is true. Okay, so the other, I'm going to answer the question, or part of the question.
Until all of a sudden the babies were going to be killed. And then he said, okay, enough.
Right.
Did God wait so long, or did it take so long?
Okay, so here's what I want to say. I cannot explain the specific pain and suffering. And the reason why I can't explain it is because we don't understand it. We don't know. Why would God have waited for a certain amount of pain? If I was God, which I'm not, I would say no pain, right? Like, so we don't understand why sometimes there's pain, why people suffer. We don't understand that, and it would be arrogant to try to figure that out, okay? We don't know why. But we do know, which, by the way, is why the Jews left Egypt in such a huff and a puff. Didn't they know they were leaving Egypt? Didn't they know that they were borrowing the things from their neighbors? They had the plagues. It sounds when you read them like it was in 5 minutes, but it was over a year's time, a whole year, 12 months. The plagues took. So it's not like they woke up one morning and we said, guys, we got to run. No, they had time to prepare, and yet when they left, it was in a huff and a puff. So you have both things. They're preparing, they're thinking about it, they're thinking ahead. But when they left, they had to leave. The sages tell us they had to leave in a split second. Why? Because if they didn't leave at that moment, they would have missed the time. Why? God wanted us, for whatever reason, to do whatever work he needed done in Egypt. And that was to transform Egypt from a place that was antagonistic or antithetical to God, right? Pharaoh himself said, I am God, which is why Moshe had to meet him at the Nile. What was he doing at the Nile at 4 o'clock in the morning? He was going to the bathroom. Okay? Because Pharaoh said, I know. So I'll call you back in 5 minutes. I'm God. I don't need I don't need any bathrooms. I'm God. But he wasn't God. And so early in the morning he'd sneak out and go to the Nile and do whatever he had to do. So God says, you know what? I want you to meet him at the Nile in the morning. He goes every morning to the Nile. I want you to talk to him and tell him that you're a messenger from me, God, and that it's time to start letting the Jews out of Egypt. And of course, Pharaoh was like, no, who is God? Never heard of him. I don't know what you're talking about. So we were in Egypt until we transformed it completely from a place that didn't accept that there was a God. In fact, Moshe keeps on saying, and Egypt will know that I am God. And Egypt will know that I am God. If you look in the book of Exodus, the beginning chapters, and Egypt will know that I am God. It's repeated many, many times. Egypt will know that I am God. Not only will they know here, they will know, they will feel, they will understand, they will get that I am God. Okay? And that is why the timing was so precise. When it couldn't happen until this time, and it had to happen exactly at this time, and then we ran. And we fled, because had we stayed one extra second, we would be beyond repair. We would be beyond repair. Because once we left Egypt, then we first had to start doing our homework. Then we first had to start freedom. Because what happens is that when you're a slave for so long, when you lose your freedom and you buy into the slave mentality. We all know, I mean, this is already, public that knowledge that when someone is in an abusive relationship, or if someone is in a difficult relationship, they don't want to get out. What? They don't want to get out. So, and even when you get them out, they're always thinking they want to go back. The mentality of being abused or a slave is very hard for a person themselves to emotionally break out of. So in addition to the fact that God plunked us out and said, now's the time, we also had to do, we couldn't stay there an extra second, because then we would be just too far in. So it was exactly at the right moment. God knew the exact time, and at that moment took us out. But I will say that Moshe echoed your question. And Moshe came to God and said, why are you making them suffer so much? And that's the
It's a question.
That's the question, yeah. That's the question. And we continue to ask it, and we don't have an answer. And, yeah.